Let's get set up here in my basement. There we go. Cool. Hello. How's it going? It's been a week or two since I've made any content on YouTube. And I thought I'd come on today on a brief live stream and talk about some things that I've learned about language learning this week. If anyone hops on live, then wonderful. And I'll answer any questions that people have on learning languages. If not, well, that's totally cool. And I'll just share some interesting things that I've learned about language learning this week. So the first thing I've learned is something I've been thinking a lot about, I would say for the past 2 weeks. I want to open some notes about this. Here we go. Okay. So a lot of people, I'm looking at some notes. I'm looking at a personalized learning plan that we've put together at the Calgary Language Nerds for a current student. This student does a really good job speaking in Spanish. So to be more specific, a lot of people, when they talk in another language, they rely heavily on English. So they mix a lot of English with their Spanish, or they have to use a translator all the time. This student, despite having an upper beginner level, is able to speak in Spanish 97% of the time. So if she is with you and you're talking to her in Spanish, she's talking to you in Spanish, even though she's still a beginner, she has the ability to stick in Spanish and maintain the conversation and stay in it 97% of the time, provided the other person's also making an effort. So that's really, really, really cool. This person also, so that's one thing I learned about that when I look at this is even when someone's a beginner, they're able to communicate, they're able to say a lot more than they think. The second thing, which is quite interesting, that I've been thinking about for the past week or two, has to do with the connection between vocabulary and fluency. So vocabulary and fluency. Hello, we have one live viewer. Amazing. So great. Hello, live viewer. The connection between vocabulary and fluency. Now, I mean fluency technically. I mean fluency in the sense of how many words per minute do you say on average? That's what I mean by fluency. So people think that they have bad fluency. They think that they speak really clunky. They think that they speak very slowly. They think it's hard. And they think the answer is more practice. But more practice is not the answer. More practice is probably not what's going to make you speak more fluently. Probably not. In the past, let's say in recent history, we've noticed something very interesting at the Calgary Language Nerds. We've noticed that if you speak not fluently, it's because you have low vocabulary. So this individual here that I'm looking at on my computer, she has an intermediate level of vocabulary and a high beginner level of fluency, like a speech rate. Hello, Venus. Hello in the chat. So she has intermediate vocabulary and her speech rate is one level below. That's really normal. So if you have advanced vocabulary, you're probably still going to only speak like an intermediate speaker in terms of how fluent and how comfortable your speech is. Interesting, right? So even if your vocabulary, so even a lot of people have a very high vocabulary. They can understand TV shows. They can understand a lot of podcasts. They can even talk with you quite a bit, but they don't feel fluent. Well, the reason is that their vocabulary is still not high enough, often. Now, the next thing I learned this week, which is interesting, hello, Ghost in the chat, hello. The next thing I learned about languages, which is also quite fascinating, this when we track student progress data, If you have a high vocabulary, but your speech rate is still really, really, really low, it means you need more practice. I'll say that one more time. If you have very high vocabulary, but your speech rate is still very low, that means you need more practice. So that's something very interesting that I've learned this week as well. The other thing I've been thinking a lot about this week is a concept that when I was taught it was called the transition curve. Now, the transition curve, actually, it's not the technical term for it. There's another term, but I don't remember the technical term. But I'll use the words I know. The transition curve, how I was taught, it's the emotional roller coaster. Hello, Ada in the chat. It's the emotional roller coaster you ride when you're learning another skill. So when you first start, you're really excited. Then your excitement builds, it builds, it builds, it builds. Then you at your peak level of excitement, something happens that reminds you that this is hard. Then your emotions start to get a bit more pessimistic. Eventually you hit rock bottom and you have a fight or flight moment and you decide, a lot of people decide this is too hard and they quit. Some people keep going and they get more optimistic again because they push through the challenge, right? And then the whole cycle starts again. And I've been thinking a lot about that transition curve. You see, most people, a lot of people, they walk when they're learning languages, they're walking through the fog. They're not very clear. They're not very clear about their goals. They're not clear about their progress. And they're definitely not keeping themselves very accountable. If 1 week they don't practice very much, they don't study very much, they don't worry about it. They don't worry about it too much. And so they're in the fog. They don't know where they're headed specifically. They don't know where they are in terms of their level. And there's not a high level of accountability. There's medium to low accountability. And one of the things that we do at the Calgary Language Nerds is we actually make things very specific. We will make it specific that what is your goal and how will we know if we got there? So we use numbers, right? Speech rate, we calculate, your vocabulary size is calculated, your grammatical accuracy is calculated, your tenses are calculated. There's a lot of stuff that we calculate and we communicate along the way. Now, what this does is people are faced with the reality. They're faced with the reality of how good or how bad they're doing in very blunt terms, right? They know if they're on track, not on track, progressing, not at all times. And actually, it can be very, very difficult, very, very difficult. Because now you can't tell yourself, oh yeah, I'm studying hard. No. You know that you didn't study hard. You can see it with your eyes. Or sometimes you can see I'm practicing a lot, but not getting better, right? Like you really have it in front of you. And this, when it's so obvious, if you're progressing, not progressing, and all that stuff is really clear to you, right? Completely open. What ends up happening is people ride that emotional roller coaster hard. They do get discouraged. They do get demotivated. But that I think is the role of an excellent tutor. The role of the excellent tutor is to ride that roller coaster with the student, to ride it with the students and help them weather that storm. I have a story for you. So I used to run a window cleaning franchise. And in that window cleaning franchise, it was a really high stress environment. It was very, very, very stressful. It was a difficult job, very difficult. We worked 60, 70, 80, 90-hour weeks, 12 hours a day, 13 hours a day, 7 hours, 7 days a week. We had very ambitious goals that were hard to hit. We had to hit them, high accountability, very difficult work environment. And because of that, the general managers, the regional managers, the president, et cetera, everyone had a ton of training on coaching, right? Everyone had a ton of training on coaching. How do you coach someone? What do you do when someone's really stressed? How do you help them work through it? What do you do, right? How do you do all of that? And I'm so grateful to have that training. It taught me so much. It taught me that, people are capable of so much. They're capable of so much. I look at one thing I've been looking a lot at, by the way, in the chat, can you work for me? Unfortunately, I'm not hiring at the moment. Sorry. But, one thing I've been looking at the past week or so is how long it takes to learn a language. There's some data on how long it takes adults to reach fluency in another language. And it depends on the language, but it's looking at about 1,000 hours on the lower end. Could be like, it could be like 3,000 plus hours on the highest end, depending on the language. So it's a long time. But what's fascinating is, who said, in my mind, one thing I ask myself a lot is, who said that that's actually how long it's supposed to take? Who said it can't be done faster? Frankly, I've been wondering that. Who said it can't be done faster? Especially because if you've been in a language learning classroom, I know this intimately. I have been in language learning classrooms from the age of five, all over the world for a lot of languages. And if you've been in language classrooms, you know something. You know that the teaching methods that are used are often not very effective. We know this. So when you look at the averages of how long it takes someone to learn a language, and they do base it off of classes, and we know that a lot of the time is not spent effectively. We know this. Well, you have to assume that maybe it's not 1,000 hours, maybe it is 600 hours, maybe it's 400 hours. We don't know what the actual number is. You see, learning a foreign language is a foreign skill to most people. Learning a foreign language is a foreign skill to most people. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how. No one's taught them. No one's shown them. And they treat it like any old school subject. They treat it like any old school subject. They treat learning a language like learning history or math. It's like memorizing math equations and doing it on a piece of paper, or memorizing history facts and memorizing it for your test. And learning a language is not that at all. Learning a language is much more intuitive. Learning a language means you're able to actually perform or act out the language. It means that you can actually talk to someone. It's much more like a performative dance, or like even fighting, or any physical skill. Like, it's like a physical skill more than it is an intellectual skill. It's really quite fascinating. It reminds me of a conversation I was having with a tutor who was telling me that there's a student that she teaches who doesn't really remember a lot of the rules as she talks, and a lot of the speech is really wonky. And here's the thing, though. Here's the thing that's really interesting. When people are speaking in another language, and they're doing, it's very rare that they're thinking of the rules and speaking with them. Some people do that. Yes, that is yes for sure. But there are lots of people that that's not what their brain is doing. They're not thinking, they're not translating in their head. They're just sort of talking. And the people who do just talk, and they need to train their intuition. It's their intuition that needs training more than anything else, right? Something like that. It's something like that. Yeah. So I think we'll wrap this live stream there. It's kind of a short one today, just a 13, 14-minute live stream. And thanks for those who watched. Hey, we had a record today. Not a single spam comment. So, hey, that's a record. If you go back and watch the other live streams, you'll see there's like a game basically in these live streams. The game has to do with what kind of comments are in the chat. So you're welcome to go and watch other live streams I've made and see some pretty hilarious spam comments. And today was pretty good. No spam comments. So hallelujah. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time. Bye-bye.